Can never really be another week in this country without some form of wokedom. Well, basically just trying to ruin our fun, particularly as Christmas is approaching. Now, I'm not a fan of the Christmas song being played before 1st of December, whichever song it is. And everyone's got their favourites. Everyone's got the ones they just, if I hear that again, I'll chop my own ears off. But I say one of a lot of people's favourites, we know it's on every Christmas album, is the Pogues' Fairytale of New York. Here's a little reminder of it.
The boys of the NY chorus still singing Go Away Bride, and the bells are ringing out for Christmas Day.
Well, I mean, that is, to me, one of the sounds of Christmas. But yesterday it was announced that Radio 1 are going to play an edited version of the Christmas hit to avoid offending its younger audience. Now, the hit, featuring Kirsty MacColl, of course, the late, great Kirsty MacColl, released in 1987, has been the focus of debate a number of times because of some of its controversial lyrics. It involves a couple who are really quite horrible to each other and includes some words, which I'm not going to say at this time of day simply because children might be listening and going to school. And that's because there are Ofcom rules about these things, and I don't want to have parents having to say, what does that word mean, mummy? However, if you're listening to Radio 1, you're going to expect to hear songs with some lyrics that you might not necessarily agree with. But Radio 1 say they're going to water down the track. They feel their younger listeners are likely to be sensitive to derogatory terms about gender and sexuality. Well, let's talk about this with Baroness Claire Fox. She's director of the Academy of Ideas and also author of a brilliant book called I Find That Offensive. Good morning to you, Claire.
Good morning.
Now, I think it's the first time I've spoken to you on air since you become a Baroness, but I hope you don't mind if we're going to go with the informality of Claire instead of Baroness Fox, if that's all right. Now,
Please do.
I just sort of censored myself then in starting this discussion, not reading out words, which I think a lot of parents would say, well, you know what, I'd rather my 6-year-old didn't hear at breakfast, or we're in the car or on the way to school or whatever. And people do that all the time. I don't want people to be swearing before the 9 o'clock watershed and the like on air. But Radio 1 said it's specific. It's not like you can't use those words, they have to be edited out. It's because they would be sensitive for younger listeners, the millennials who'd be upset about hearing words which were derogatory terms for gender and sexuality. What do you make of that?
I think that you put the right emphasis on it. These are lyrics in a song. In that sense, they've got a certain validity because they're what makes the music work. And as a consequence, the way that the BBC made a decision on behalf of their listeners who they assumed would be offensive for political reasons is an act of censorship. And a lot of people have said, and I get this, they think, oh, this is just people like you, Claire, stirring up a controversy over a song. There's always trouble about these things every year. Is this part of you stirring up the culture war? But I mean, I didn't issue the statement. The BBC actually issued a statement clearly stating it was going to take this act as a political act, and it entreats young people, and not the children you're referring to, not this morning, but actually young teenagers, young people in their 20s who listen to Radio 1, who should be and are familiar with the fact that lyrics are part of the art form of whatever song, and there's an awful lot of offensive words in lyrics. So are they going to go through and kind of comb through them and do the same to every single song?
Well, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? And we're used to things like, say, I'm thinking Kanye West and Jamie Foxx, Gold Digger. I mean, yeah. I'm a white person. I'm not happy with saying that word. Singing it along as a lyric, the word that rhymes with gold digger. I think I'm pretty sure I've done it when I'm just singing along to the original track. But we know on the radio they play it. The word is muted. You just can't hear it. You don't even know the word exists if you haven't heard the unedited version. There's a difference, isn't there, between sort of saying, look, children are likely to be listening. It's a family radio show or TV show, and we just don't impose those words on people sort of out of the blue. But there do seem to be different rules for different artists, don't there? I mean, a lot of the rap songs around the moment, and particularly those by black artists, and particularly black female artists, there doesn't seem to be an issue with. I mean, most of the songs by Rihanna and Cardi B, the lyrics are absolutely disgusting and obscene. Now, I can choose to listen, choose not to listen, to buy, to not to buy, but there doesn't seem to be the same issue with that.
No, I mean, it seems inconsistent, but the most important thing is, are we in a situation where a radio station is going to make artistic decisions on behalf of the artist? Now, there's a complication here, which is the Pogues say, oh, well, we don't care that they've removed the words. I mean, so I don't want to pretend that the artists are all upset. I object to the fact that a radio station did this on our behalf, as it were, in case somebody's offended. But I also think there's a context here. I've been listening to you talking about some of the controversies around COVID and around evidence and data. And I just saw that a film that was doing very well, it was a film made by Unlock yesterday, interviewing a doctor. Dr. Eden has been removed by YouTube.
Well, yeah, Mike, let's just clarify. Mike Eden, we've had on the show a number of times. He's a former vice president. Right. Many times, yeah. He used to be a VP at Pfizer. Incredibly, absolutely knows his stuff. He's not random bloke off the street with a theory.
Right, yeah.
And he's producing evidence-based arguments about why he believes that the epidemic is over and testing is the problem rather than we're not seeing excess deaths, etc. etc. But the fact that stuff gets taken off YouTube as opposed to discussed and debated.
I saw lots of people watching it yesterday and discussing for and against, pros and cons. Some people had really enjoyed the video, found it informative. It was removed today. Also yesterday, the Law Commission came out with a report of potential changes they want to make to the law around hate crime, which included, by the way, the idea that there should be the removal of the exemption for home properties in terms of whether you say offensive things. So the point about this Fairytale in New York is it's not just a one-off, is it? The context for this decision being taken, which is you can't hear that, it's offensive. I feel as though we're in a more censorious climate. And I think that's why people just feel they're being patronised to, treated like children. And if you start saying that things can be banned if they're offensive, we know where that leads. And the law report, by the way, made it clear that they thought offensive cartoons, and they cited infamous offensive cartoons, should be banned. Now, we've just seen somebody in France beheaded for teaching a free speech class about those offensive cartoons. I would have thought that we should see that this Fairytale in New York seems like the annual argument at Christmas about whether we should have this word. Let's remember the context here, which is this is about whether we live in a free society and whether free speech exists. So it's more important than just some silly little trivial.
And that's the thing, and it's about people deciding on our behalf. You're back to last night of the Proms and Rule Britannia, and sort of I don't like these lyrics, or someone doesn't like these lyrics, and therefore they're unacceptable. And again, even if it's the majority of people don't like it, it doesn't mean it shouldn't be allowed. And that's the key. And there seems to be so much of an appetite now for people to want there to be censorship and control, and that people expect never to be offended. It doesn't bother me if someone says or does something that I don't like, unless it personally, hurts me or physically, or it is inciting violence or it's abuse. It is currently legal in the law, and it should remain legal.
And it's important for art. I mean, artistic freedom is an incredibly important thing for us to defend. So, whether you like the song or not, the point about it is that somebody created that as an artistic work. And, think about what it means if you've effectively got bodies of institutions going around saying, no, that's offensive, take it off the walls, cover it up. Now, as it happens, we are getting that. And the whole notion of, I find that offensive, and one of the reasons I wrote the book was because they're increasingly, all you have to do is to say, I find that offensive, and you can get something banned, silence someone, shut someone down. And that is not a healthy society for a democracy, because you need to have artistic freedom, academic freedom and free speech. So I just get worried that this can happen, and people say, well, of course, in the modern era, we can't possibly have that phrase being used. We will make that decision because we think it could cause damage. And the point you also just made was hearing that word might offend someone, but it doesn't mean that that's the end of the world. I'm offended every day. People say things that really drive me mad. But you can't be in a situation whereby you say that if something's offensive, it should be banned. That's the important thing about it. Yeah. But it's not going to.
You have no right not to be offended.
I know. I mean, let's face it, Julia. I mean, people find you offensive.
Oh, yes.
But exactly.
So if you're including members of my own immediate family.
So don't let them ban things on the basis that they're offensive.
Absolutely.